Hi, I'm Robbie Eames. I'm a relationship coach for couples and individuals. And pivotal role that emotions play in romantic relationships. And I think we all can agree that emotions play a pivotal role, that it's one of the major skills in romantic relationship that can lead to a more positive and connecting experience with each other. And I say specifically it's about relating to emotions. And what I mean by relating to emotions is what it's like for me to have that emotion and how I relate to that experience, the way I relate to the role of emotions in my life and in romantic relationships, the relationship with your partner, and the way that you have to express emotions, and also the ways to relate to upset in your partner. So those are all the ways that I'm going to explore in this series on emotions and romantic relationships. And a great place to start is as a companion to an article that I recently wrote and linked in the description below about having a shared understanding of emotions. And so this video will focus on that. And stick around to the end because I'm going to walk through a shared understanding of emotions for couples. We're going to try it on with an example. We're going to talk about using that example, how it can contribute to positive change in your relationship. And at the end, I'm going to offer a practice for you and your partner to try on to use this shared understanding. So stick around to the end, and that'll be an opportunity to try it on with your partner and see what you notice and how it feels. So just a quick pause from the resource just for a moment, that if this resource on emotions is speaking to you and speaking to your partner, you may want to consider the emotions course for couples. There's a link below, and check that out. And it's a structured and sequenced way to go deeper. So in my work with hundreds of couples, making their romantic relationships better, what I find is that relating to your emotions is one of the major factors in terms of the overall quality of how it feels to be in your relationship and the quality of reliable connection and support and care. And so if that speaks to you and you'd like to go deeper in a structured and supported way with your partner and with other couples, check out the Emotions course for couples. More information is below. So why focus on emotions in romantic relationships? Relating to emotions is one of the most important skills in being a human being and also in being in relationship with other people, especially in romantic relationships, because romantic relationships have a special quality of them. There's a specialness to them that contributes to an intensity in those emotional experiences, because our romantic relationship is really important to us. And so we'll talk more about that in other resources. So we'll just name that now as an important point. But me having an understanding in my my emotional life can shift how and what I choose to express with my partner. It can shift what my own relationship is, how it feels to be in that emotional experience. And when I have strategies and skills for being with my partner's upset, there are ways that I can respond to it that are more soothing and constructive reliably. And so those times when, relating to this, if you can imagine those times when things escalated really quickly in an interaction, emotions were involved there. So having skills around relating to emotions can allow us to either avoid that escalation or to have ways to respond to it, both in me and also together with your partner. And also, what about, is it in your experience maybe that you and your partner avoid certain topics because they're challenging and they're uncomfortable to talk about? Well, emotions are involved there too. And so, having more confidence and resilience and reliability that we can talk about anything and we can do that in a calm, respectful, and caring way. And so emotions are really important. They're also really important for me to understand what about the relationship is important to me and to be direct and share that with my partner, but in a way that they can hear me in terms of what I'm longing for more in the relationship. So let's try on a framework for emotions. And here it's what's offered in the companion article that's linked below. And it's something that I first learned from Dan Siegel in his offerings on interpersonal neurobiology, also called IPNB acronym. And he offers a framework called BEATS. And BEATS is an acronym. And so let me explain the components of the acronym and what the acronym is about. So BEATS is a framework for for understanding emotional experience in its constituent parts. And so it's really helpful, transformative to understand that what may feel like to some of you as a holistic experience, sort of a monolithic experience, is a series of different pieces to it. And there's some advantages of that, which I'll talk about later in the video. But for now, in terms of clarity, what the emotional experience means, in terms of making it more tractable or manageable and breaking it down, and getting to the meaning of the emotional experience, trying on some ways to express it, all those are part of the BEATS framework, or at least start with the framework of a shared understanding. And so let me quickly go through the beats and explain them. And then next, we're going to try it on with a real life example. So beats: beliefs, experiences, actions, thoughts, and stories. And so we're going to walk through each one of those. And before I do that, the order is important for the acronym to spell beats, but it's not important in terms of the way an emotional experience evolves or how we connect to that emotional experience. Sometimes we might connect to the thoughts first, or we might notice the actions first, an urge to do something, or we might notice the experience first, the bodily sensations. And so it's not about the order. So what are each of these components? Let me talk about them out of order. So experience, that's the bodily sensations. And so that's the felt sense of what it's like to have this emotional experience. The heat or the temperature, the movement, the energy, the constriction or the ease, the relaxation, the tension, the movement, the rolling around in my stomach, for example. That felt sense. Not how I'm thinking about it, or that's the thoughts part. Just what it feels like, what the energy, the tingling, or the temperature, or the movement, or the constriction, or the relaxation feels like. Can we all relate that that's part of an emotional experience? So the E for the experience is the bodily sensations. The T for thoughts is a great place to go next. The thoughts are all the things that come up in me. The planning. What should I do about this? What does it mean? What do I think about? Or how do I relate to this emotional experience? I like it. I don't like it. Those are all thoughts. I want this to stop. I want this to end. Or I like this. I wish it would continue. Those are all thoughts. I wonder if I should reply to this email. That's I wonder what's going to happen next. The prediction are thoughts. Why did this happen? I wonder what was going on. Why is this happening now? So trying to understand the experience. Those are all categories of thoughts, which are part of an emotional experience too. One thing to name here is that these components of the beats of an emotional experience are related to each other. So the thoughts may fuel bodily sensations. Sometimes we notice that how we think about an emotional experience, or how we think about a situation that's happening to us in our life, either can turn down the volume of the felt sense, or it can ratchet up the intensity of the felt sense. So noticing that these things are related to each other too, which is very important. And that's also true of thoughts and beliefs. And so beliefs are a special category of thoughts. They're ones that tend to be somewhat stable over time. We learn them through our experiences, and they're ways that we have of relating to our experiences. They're ways that we have of understanding them, making meaning out of them. So beliefs, they tend to be kind of categorical in nature, or somewhat binary. It's this, or it's always this, or never this. And so, but they tend to be general too, about different kinds of experiences or interactions and what they mean. So let me give you some. So, a belief about me, about my partner, about the world, about other people, about our relationship, beliefs about work or about play. So we have beliefs about those things that help us understand our lives and what it's like to be in the world and be with other people, right? So those beliefs help us interpret our experience. We filter our experience through those beliefs and say, oh, okay, people are typically trustworthy. The world is typically safe. And just notice the kind of binary nature of this. And so that colors it. But notice if the beliefs are people tend not to follow through on their agreements and the world is scary and unsafe, then that's a very different quality of interpretation of our experience, of your experiences, right? And so I'm just naming these as some examples as examples of beliefs so you get a sense of what they are. Beliefs about me. I tend to share openly and honestly. I follow through on my agreements, or the opposite of those. And they can be somewhat nuanced. So most of the time, so that can be a belief. You can add, sometimes the beliefs are like that, not always categorical in nature. And another part of beats is the S, the stories. And so stories we each have a personal narrative. So you have a personal narrative that links all the events of your life together, that tells your own life story. And we have that as part of the way we think about things. It's another special kind of thought, but it's helpful to tease it out as one where you're the central character, or one of the central characters in your story of your life. And then how does what's happening now relate to what's happened before? And so that might be, oh, this is like similar to that other relationship I had, or this is just like all the relationships I've had, or I tend to do this in my recent relationship experience. Those would all be parts of your story. Or even in your relationship with your partner now. This is the third or fourth time that this has happened, right? So tying what's happening now to other experiences and grouping them together and saying, this forms a pattern. That's a kind of thought that's part of your personal narrative, right? And then there's what it means to you in the trajectory of the arc of your life and what you want in your life. That's all part of the story as well. So it's important to be aware of those special kind of thoughts and how they influence the emotional experience, because that has a powerful role too. We want our lives, we want to have enriching, enlivening experiences in our lives. Moving on to the last part of the emotional experience in the BEATS model is actions. And so this is what comes up with us in you about options for how to respond to the emotional experience. Oh, what if I did this? What if I did this? And some of those can be really fast coming on. They can feel like urges, urgency related to them. Like, oh, I need to do this now. This is the only way. So that's part of the action, is noticing that movement, moving away, moving towards, wanting to respond. And part of it is relating to those actions in a different way. Oftentimes giving them space and checking them out and saying, how will that serve me and us, right? And then actions such as, what you do about it. What are your options? How might they, what might communicate to your partner, what your emotional experience is, what's going on in you, or what's most important to you. And so that plays a pivotal role because, the expression of emotion is a lot of the part that leads to disconnection, that leads to the breakdown in collaboration and leads to some hurts in terms of, oh, I can't believe you just said that, or, ooh, ouch, that didn't feel good. And so paying attention to the actions, the expressions, is critically important in terms of navigating our shared life together and how emotions play a role in that. So that's the BEATS model. That's a quick introduction to the components of an emotional experience, all part of a shared understanding of it, but the beats can also be ways that we talk about it as well. So, hey, here's what it feels like to be me in terms of what happened. And, or I'm telling myself a story, or I'm having some thoughts about it, right? One last thing about the beats model, and it probably should have been where I started, but be that as it may, sitting next to the beats model, having gone through that now, you can see that all these things are in me. Every part of them, the felt sense, the thoughts, beliefs, stories, the actions is where it comes out into the relational space. Those are all in me. It helps to start with what actually happened. The facts are what actually happened. And that's actually a good segue into trying on with an example, but that's a part of it too. Facts plus beats. So now let's try a real life example for what is this, how would this actually be helpful in your romantic relationship? So I selected an example that I hope is one that we all can relate to. And let me start with the facts of what happened. And that is that your partner and you decided to meet up after work. This morning you chatted and you came up with a plan for meeting up at 6 o'clock after work and what you're going to do at 6. 6 o'clock rolls around and you're sitting on the sofa at home where you agreed to meet up, and your partner doesn't arrive. 6:15, 6:30, 6:45, 7 o'clock they finally come home. Between 6 and 7, you didn't receive any communications from them. No text, no phone call, no voicemail, anything about an update. So can we all agree that those are the facts, that there was a plan this morning that you and your partner had to meet up at 6? You agreed to do that. 6 o'clock comes, you are where you agreed to meet up, to the best of your knowledge, and your partner's not there until 7. They come in, and you hadn't received an update between 6 and 7. Okay, those are the facts of what happened. That is what it is. Everything else in the beats model is what happened in you. So again, we can drop into any part of the beats framework, and here we're going to drop into the experience, the E part, which is the felt sense of the bodily sensations. And so imagine sitting there on the sofa in this scenario, and the felt sense is maybe a constriction in my chest, constriction in your chest, a constriction in your forehead, a heat in your face. This is worry. This is worry. I'm worried about them. And notice that the labeling of the emotional experience is a thought, right? So we've moved from being with the felt sense to a thought about what the emotional experience might be. So naming those components, right? And it's natural to kind of shift between them. This heat and this constriction, it's disappointment. I was excited you were excited to be with your partner, and it's disappointing that it's not happening the way that you expected. And that's also, that's a thought, trying on a label and saying, is it disappointment? That feels about right. And maybe, there's another emotional part of the emotional experience, which is frustration. I'm noticing frustration, that this has an impact on me, that you arranged your day to be in a certain place at a certain time, and it's frustrating to have a plan and that plan, not work out with your partner. And that has some impact in terms of things that you sacrificed or put aside to be on time, right? And so notice one thing about the beats model is it points to and confirms that in checking out the felt sense of it, the E, that oftentimes there are multiple emotional experiences simultaneously. In this case, worry, disappointment, and frustration. Okay, that's all in the mix here. And so being with the felt sense allows me to take that in one part, to dip into the thoughts about trying on some labels, which is definitely a thought, and go back and just say, okay, let me, and I'm going rather fast in this video because of the time constraints and trying to be efficient, but you can really take your time in this and be with the felt sense. What is this experience? And that can be really helpful because it's the felt sense. It's often what that feels like, that it feels uncomfortable. It feels like, I don't, it leads to thoughts like, I don't like this, or I want this to be over, or I need to do something about it now. And those are thoughts, right? So by being with the felt sense and taking your time with that and giving yourself some space, I'm practicing that I can then begin to bring into real time a different relationship with those experiences. The more I practice that, the more, I can be with them in isolation for some time. And also, I can tolerate them. I can grow in my window of tolerance with them oftentimes. And that might lead to more spaciousness and options. So we've already dipped in from the E to the T once, and now we'll go over to the T a little bit more and say, okay, what thoughts are coming up with me? And some of this is not only noticing the content of the thoughts, but oftentimes in an emotional experience, the pacing of the thoughts. Sometimes some certain emotions are associated with more thoughts, the quantity of thoughts, and also a faster pace of the thoughts happening. So that's part of the T in the beats model too, is noticing the quality of the thoughts. You might also notice the valence of the thoughts or the category of the thoughts. That's, these are all in the negative valence, which things I don't like or things I don't want. Okay. That might also point to a part of the emotional experience and ways to relate to emotions, right? Because that might be associated with disappointment or sadness or fear when those negative valences come up in thoughts. Thoughts in certain times of categories, like about my partner or about their motives. That might also be a clue as to the emotional experience. So the quality of the thoughts as well, and the category of thoughts. And the content of thoughts. I'm worried about them. I don't know what happened. That's one. Like wanting clarity, wanting to understand what's going on, wanting more information. That points to that thought points to that being an important part. Thoughts about what might be going on with my partner. And here we never have access to that, right? So these thoughts, just quickly, foreshadowing that thoughts about what my partner's motives are, what their intentions are, or what they're thinking about. Those are things we never have direct access to. You never have direct access to that. And so holding those really lightly that, oh, I don't know. I don't know. So these thoughts, um, they don't care about me, or maybe they forgot, or anything that has to do with what's going on in their mind or their experience. I bet you they don't even care. That's a thought, right? And we never have direct access to that. Considerations about what I how I might respond to this is a category of thought. Relating this to past experiences is another type of thought. Like, oh, this is the third time recently that they have not shown up on time. So relating it, and then what that might mean is also a thought. Okay, grouping experiences together and saying these are similar, or this is a pattern. Those are thoughts too, and there are whole categories of thoughts which I've created some resources about. It's helpful to kind of say, oh, this is planning. This is my guesses about my partner's intentions or motives, or about the other person's experience, right? Or this is about categorizing and relating to the past, and seeing patterns. And there's many more of categories of thought. So it's helpful to become fluent in those categories too, to be able to try on which kind of thought is that. Going to beliefs. In this case, I can check out and be with my thoughts and say, well, what beliefs might this be pointing to? Well, I'm not going to go through a long litany of them, but I have a belief that partners in a romantic relationship should honor their agreements. I have a belief that it's important for partners to consider what the impact is on each other. I have a belief about myself that I honor my agreements, things like that. And just notice that I have those beliefs in me, and they could be the opposite. I have a belief that people tend not to do what they say they're going to do because they get overwhelmed with their own experience, right? So depending upon your experience, we may have different beliefs. Importantly, by becoming aware of those, noticing them, being with what is in terms of what beliefs you bring to your experience now, it helps understand, oh, why does this feel like this to me? How might I be interpreting it based upon that belief? And so those are some examples related to this specific scenario. It might be different for each of you. Stories. Oh, again, this is my personal narrative about linking my experiences together and giving them some meaning. What they mean for me. What does my life mean? And that's really important. It's part of being human. And so a story here might be that you've noticed that this is what your relationship's like, that you show up and honor agreements and the other person doesn't. So, I'm telling myself a story that this is the way things happen. I wonder, that this is the way relationships go. This is the way my relationship experience has been. This is a common part of my life. So that might be in the mix, some story about that. Or it could be the opposite. Hey, this is the first time, typically in my relationships, we both know what's important to each other and we honor those things, and agreements are held with a great deal of importance. And something doesn't feel good about how we're doing things now in this current relationship, right? So that could be a story too. And then actions, the last one, part of the Beats model. So I wonder if I should text or call them to find out where they are at 6:15, for example. That would be an action. Ruminating in my head about, what am I going to say when they walk through the door? How am I going to let them know? I'm going to give them an earful of what the impact was me and what my experience was and how this was really uncomfortable. I was worried. I'm disappointed. I'm frustrated. That's part of the A as well. Okay? So the actions part of it, and trying on and, noticing, is there an urge to do one thing immediately, and why? How might that serve me or serve us? What might that feel like for the other people involved, for my partner in this case? Okay? So we've walked through and we've tried on how to apply beats to a concrete example. And hopefully that was helpful in making it even more, clarifying it even more. And also it's helpful to walk through that process together so you get a feel for it. So in this next section, we're going to talk about, well, why is this important? I'm going to cover a few reasons, and then we'll end with a practice for you and your partner to try on the Beats model together. Why is this important? I'm just going to list a couple of examples, or a couple of reasons. One is that by having this way of relating to your emotional experience, that it can have a soothing quality. By what feels overwhelming and monolithic, these different parts not just kind of having an impact on you, by breaking it down into its constituent parts and taking them one by one, it can feel more tractable. It can feel less overwhelming. And that can influence the spaciousness for choosing actions and the clarity that you have about what this emotional experience means. And also what's actually happening versus differentiating that and distinguishing it from the beats, which are everything that are my own experience of it. And that leads to the second important reason, is that oftentimes we relate to the beats, the emotional experience, as part of the truth. This is what is. And so this framework of facts plus beats allows me to distinguish and allows you to distinguish, here's what happened, and then here's what I added to it, or here's what got stimulated in me. Here's what came up in me in relating to that experience. And all these things have a different quality to them because, oh, these are products of me. And so they're not the facts of it. They're ways that they're things that, ways that I interpreted it, or ways that it's meaningful for me. And that's an important part of it too, because distinguishing between that both changes how the emotional experience might feel, and also changes how I talk about them and share them with my partner. In other words, let's drop into that by distinguishing the facts versus beats, I can talk about my experience, the beats part of my experience. Hey, here's what it felt like to be me. Hey, I'm noticing I had a thought about it when this happened. Hey, I was telling myself a story. And by prefacing it that way, it makes it easier for your partner to hear it, because it's not the facts of it. It's not what happened. It's not, this is the only way. It's just, hey, here's what came up in me. And it can also be helpful to, in talking about an experience, talk about a situation, to say, hey, can we both agree that this is what happened? To start with the facts. That can be a great place to start. And also, it can be that the two of you have different recollections of what happened, especially if it's something that happened a long time ago, if it wasn't recent. And that's a separate, it's a separate topic which I've covered in other materials and which I can cover again. But there are ways to navigate that too. That's not an uncommon experience. And so, notice what comes up with you and when you and your partner have a different recollection of what happened. And there are ways to kind of diffuse and handle that skillfully too. So those are all parts, and having a shared language to talk about it allows you to bring that emotional experience in a way that can be connecting and constructing, rather than automatic habitual actions, expressions, the A in the beats model, being the primary way that you and your partner relate to emotional experiences, and some of those being, more reliably leading to disconnection. In other words, raising the volume of my speech to let my partner know that this is important and I'm angry, or I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, I was worried. Hey, I was worried. There are ways to let my partner know, hey, this was really had a big impact on me. I was really worried, but in a way that they can hear me, right? So taking the message of the emotional experience, but choosing an expression of it that is more likely to be received, to allow you to stay in connection in the interaction and allow your message to be most likely heard, as opposed to, ramping up the volume of the tone of it, or changing my body language. So being mindful of those things and choosing the expression that's most likely to lead to being heard, being understood, and to staying in connection, and to giving your partner space to share their experience too, and holding some of the interpretations lightly and checking them out with your partner. So hopefully that was helpful to walk through a concrete example and to try on the beats model. It's been pivotal in my work with clients. It's part of our emotions course for couples, which there's more information about that on my website. And it's an important part of you and your partner potentially learning together about your emotional experience, and more so than a shared understanding of the language, but going through the whole gamut of emotional experiences in terms of the special role of fear and anger, talking about ways that your experiences have shaped your emotional experiences and a deeper understanding, talking about what expressions work for the two of you. Those are all part of the emotions course for couples. So in this next section, we're going to be talking about a practice that you and your partner can do together. And so I'm going to have an offering for a shared practice where you can try this on and see how it feels. It may become an important part of your relationship. So the practice is to set aside 20 or 30 minutes, and somewhere private, somewhere quiet, somewhere without distractions, and to agree, hey, we're going to try on the BEATS model. We're going to try to develop a shared understanding and language for emotions. And first of all, you and your partner are going to, when you're in this space and settled, to just take a moment and think about a recent experience that had an emotional quality to it. And for practice, especially if you're just starting out, I'd recommend that you choose something that's low intensity, not about your relationship, and not about your partner. So something about some other relationship in your life, something that's low to moderate intensity. This is practice. It's like, do you jump into the deep end, just like any other skill? Do you jump into the deep end of the swimming pool when you're learning, or do you get into the shallow end first? Do you try to do the most advanced tennis stroke, or do you try on the forehand and do some repetitions of that by bouncing the ball, not by playing in Wimbledon first, right? So that's the whole point. So choose something recent, low to moderate intensity, not about your relationship, not about your partner. When each of you have something, divide the time in half with a timer and set the timer for half the time that you've allotted and decide who's going to be the listener first and who's going to be the sharer first. If you're the sharer, you start with the facts of what happened, then you walk through the beats, right? And you make a clear differentiation. Here's what happened, and you check that out together. Is there anything in there that's not just a fact, that's interpretation or that's not sort of an objective, what actually happened? And then you go to the subjective, which is beats. Here, and you can drop into any one of the components. When you feel complete enough, or when the timer goes off, you thank each other, and the listener just listens. It just is a presence, a caring presence, a listener to the sharer's experience. You switch roles and you do it again with now the new sharer's experience. Same thing. Facts of what happened and what were the beats. And walk through that and see how that feels. And it might be clunky at first, right? It's going to take this might be new for each of you, and just be caring and gentle with each other and supportive. That, it might be hard to connect to some of these things. It might be, oh, that's not a felt sense. That's not an experience. That's a thought. That's not a sensation, right? So being gentle with that, not really correcting each other, but just, learning as you go. And then if there's any remaining time at the end, taking a moment to thank each other and also to check in, how did that feel? Do we think this is helpful? Is there some way that we could do this next time? Do we want to do it next time? If so, when could we do that? Is there anything that we learned from this experience to iteratively make that better in terms of next time? So that's the practice. And again, there's a companion article linked below where that outlines that practice. And there's the steps in writing there too, if that could be a support. So thanks for being with me, and I hope this is helpful. And there'll be a series on emotions coming in future videos and articles as well. Thank you.